Hello everybody, welcome. Thanks for coming out so early. I thought it was just going to be me in here at one point. Okay, today I am going to talk about how to improve your images using the masking and layer adjustment tools in Photoshop. I've talked about this a bit before because this forms the basis of how I do all my composite imaging. But I recognize that that is something that is kind of advanced and not that useful to most people. But the reason I'm bringing it up again now is that Photoshop has made major changes to the program that make those tools very much more accessible, very much easier to use, much quicker to use. So I think now that puts them within easy reach of most people, and when you see what they have to offer, you might decide to give them a try, because again, they are very, very much easier to use and faster to use than they were in the past. So specifically, what am I talking about? Here's an image I took just about a year ago in Kuntz in the Czech Republic. It's part of a hyperstereo. The 3D came out great, but as you can see, it wasn't the brightest day. So I turned it into that. Okay? So if you like that better than that, then stick around, because that's what I'm going to show you to do. And I want to make it clear that the reason I needed to use layer masking here is when I first adjusted it, I got this. So the foreground is what I want, but the sky wasn't what I wanted. So I needed to mask the sky off and do a separate adjustment to it. That's why I needed the layer adjustments. Okay. So here's our agenda. I'm going to talk about what a mask is, what adjustments are. I'm going to tell you how to make masks, and then I'm going to put it together. Masks plus the adjustments. Okay, so what is a mask? It's real simple. It's a way of defining an area in an image over which a certain adjustment will apply, and it's also a way of cropping an image or part of an image. So let me just show you what I mean by that. I'm going to take this rectangular mask tool. I'm going to just draw a little rectangle there. And now if I do an adjustment, you're going to see that it only applies to that rectangular area. Okay? And these masks can be absolutely any shape. I have other geometrical shapes here. Could have done it like this. They can be irregular shapes. I could draw something. They can be partially transparent or have gradients and a lot of other stuff that I'm not going to get into today. Now, I know I clicked through a lot of things very fast right there. Don't worry about that. I'm going to go back and show you all those things step by step. But first, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows what I mean by a mask. It's a limited area over which I apply an adjustment. Okay, so what do I mean by adjustments? There's something that changes the color, the contrast, the sharpness, the exposure, and a bunch of other things in an image. And it turns out that within Photoshop, there are two types of adjustments you can use. The first are called layer adjustments, and the second are called image adjustments. And this is arbitrary. This is simply the way Photoshop is written. Don't ask me why. I don't think it's logical. I don't even like it. But it's Photoshop, and that's what they give you. The big difference is that layer adjustments, you can make as many as you want, and each one of those can have a separate mask. Image adjustments, you can also have as many as you want, but they all have to share the same mask, and you're going to see how that plays out a little later. Now, of course, Photoshop has a large number of adjustments, and within each of those adjustments there are numerous options, not quite infinite, but they are extraordinarily large. Don't panic. I don't want to overwhelm you. There are really just a few that I use regularly. I want to show you what I consider to be the most useful and valuable ones now. Okay, so first we're going to look at the layer adjustments, and I get to those by going in the Photoshop menus to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then it drops this, and each one of these is a separate adjustment. Brightness, contrast, levels, each one of these is a different thing. And again, as I said, there are really four that I personally rely on the most, these four: curves, vibrance, hue, saturation, lightness, and photo filter. I'd say I use curves on every single image I take without exception. And I'm going to demonstrate for you quickly what each one of these do. Again, I'm not going to explore them thoroughly. There are a million options in each one of them. I'm going to show you the basic functionality, and if you like what you see, you can go off and start to explore it for yourself. So again, I find curves to be the single most useful tool. It also alters exposure and contrast, and if you know how to use it, you can do amazing things with it. So let's take a look at that. So again, layer, new adjustment layer, curves. I'll show you what that box does later, so don't worry that I clicked right through it. So here's the first thing you get within curves. What you have here is what's called an image histogram. And what that is simply a plot of the number of pixels you have at each brightness level. This is 100% black, this is 100% white. So this shows me that I got a lot of dark pixels, which, surprise, surprise, look at this image. It's got a lot of dark pixels. Not that much in the mid-tone, and then a little bump up here near the top, which is almost certainly these sky pixels that are brighter. And you'll notice in this particular image, I don't have any really, really bright pixels. And you can see that if you look in here. There's nothing that is 100% white. Even the brightest parts of the clouds are still slightly gray. Now, this is the curve, this straight line here. You're going to see I'm going to change its shape in a moment. And what happens is when you change its shape, if you move the curve up, whatever pixels are directly under that part of the curve get brighter, and whichever pixels, when you pull it down, whichever pixels are under that part of the curve get darker. So let me just show you what I mean by that. If I just grab it, and I'm holding the left mouse key down now, and I just pull it up. So now I'm pulling it up, every part of the curve is moving up, which means that every pixel in the image gets brighter, but you can see it's not moving as much here, so that means it's brightening these mid-tone pixels more than it's brightening the brightest pixels. Same thing here, I'm moving it down. And again, it's going to affect these pixels more. So in other words, this pixel right here got darker, these ones did because the curve is pulled down above, immediately above them. Now, you can click anywhere you want on that curve and put an anchor point. And once you do that, you pin the curve there, and you can kind of what I call rubber band around it. So now if I grab it and do this, you see how it's pivoting there? So now look at what I'm doing here. This half of the curve is moving up, which means all these brighter pixels get brighter, and all these darker pixels, the curve moved down, they get darker. And you can see that. This has increased the contrast in the image, because it's made the lighter pixels brighter and the darker pixels darker. And if I go the other way, I'm decreasing the contrast. And you can see that it's turning the whole thing kind of gray, because the brighter pixels have gotten darker and the darker pixels have gotten brighter, so it's compressed everything in it and made less of a difference in the overall brightness of the thing. And I can put as many of these anchor points in as I want, and when I do that, you can get quite surgical with this thing. So in other words, now if I just grab this, you'll see it's only going to move that one little section of the curve. And if you look at it, you can see all I'm affecting now is those very darkest pixels, the roofs, and a little bit of that dark part of the plant. Does everybody see that happening? I'm off to the side on this screen, so I can't really see it well. Hopefully that was obvious. I'm going to put a bunch more anchor points in here, and now I'm going to grab this, and if all goes well, I should just be affecting the sky. You see nothing's really happening in the foreground, but the sky's getting affected because I'm only, let me go one more anchor point there, I'm only affecting these pixels right under here.
How are you making that? How are you making that pinpoint?
I just simply click on the curve. So I'm left mouse clicking and it drops an anchor point. Left mouse click, it drops an anchor point. And then if you decide, oh, I went insane and put too many, you can go back to default. And it also has a bunch of built-in ones, which I virtually never use. Oh, and the other thing it has is a key over here called Auto. You just click that and Photoshop looks at you and says, this is probably what you should do. It's a real-time saver. And once you got it, you're not stuck with it. Okay, yeah, I like what you did Photoshop, but not 100%. I'm going to go in and change it a little bit. Okay, but that auto key can be your friend, is all I can say. And again, there are numerous adjustments. First of all, this is RGB, but I can operate on individual color curves, individual channels, okay? And the other thing that I find quite useful are these 3 eyedroppers, or there's really just one of them. This sets the 100% black point, this sets the mid-gray, and this sets the white. And what it does specifically is when you click on one of these, and then you move into the image, wherever you left mouse click, it will force that pixel and similar pixels to take on the value specified, namely 100% black, exactly mid-tone gray, or exactly 100% white. And let me show you an example of where that can be awfully handy. Here's a picture of me, you might recognize, and I'm against a white wall, but it should be fairly obvious that that wall doesn't really look white. It looks slightly orangish. Hopefully everybody sees that. I don't know how good the color accuracy on this thing is. So I'm going to go Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Curves. And now I'm going to take that mid-tone gray, and I'm going to click on the white wall. And now it's forced that and all the similar pixels to be exactly neutral gray. So you see that in one mouse click, I have now color corrected the entire image. That's why I'm trying to tell you guys that if you know how to use this thing, you know, you could use auto and that, and in 2 mouse clicks you have done a dramatic improvement in your image. And you'll notice that it split the different color curves. It was orange, which meant that overall there was too much red in this image and not enough blue. So it pulled down the red, hit up the blue. That's how it did it. The next thing I want to show you is hue, saturation, brightness. And we'll stay on this one because it's got some useful stuff. So new adjustment layer, hue, saturation. And there are 3 main things here: hue, saturation, and lightness. Default, yeah. And these 2 rainbow bars at the bottom show you what it's doing. The top one always stays the same. It's your existing colors. And if you change it, you'll notice that bottom one is sliding relative to it. So this tells me that what was red becomes yellow. What was yellow becomes green. What was, violet becomes red. That shows you this is the original colors. This is the transformed colors here. And just like the curves, you can drop this down and get different color channels. But in this case, you have 6. You not only have red, green, blue, you also have the complements. And in this particular shot, you can really see how effective that can be. Because I picked cyan up, and if you look at this image, there's only one thing in it that's cyan, and that is my pattern on my shirt. So now if I start sliding this, I'm affecting that and virtually nothing else, because there isn't much cyan in my face or the wall. You got it? So you think everybody grooving on what this thing can do? Now, one thing that you discover immediately if you use the saturation slider is if you get, oh hang on, I'm just on cyan. If you get too aggressive with it, or really use it at all, it immediately starts to make the images look pretty ridiculous, like a comic book. So unless that happens to be the particular effect you want, it's of limited utility. You might be able to bump it up very slightly, but it very quickly starts to give you an effect that is not particularly realistic. So a while back, Photoshop introduced another adjustment called vibrance. And vibrance allows you to punch up the colors in your images, but it prevents you from doing anything that's going to look too awful. And it does that by only acting on colors that aren't already heavily saturated, and also intends to leave the skin tones alone. So let me give you an example where you can really see it. Layer, new adjustment layer, vibrance. So as I increase the vibrance, you can see it's finally kicks in and affects the skin tones a little bit, but not dramatically. And then the butterfly, which is already very saturated, is virtually not changed at all. What's changing is the things that were fairly pale. Her shirt, the background, those things are getting punched up. Whereas if I took the saturation and did it, it's like, yeah, in a heartbeat it starts to be not particularly attractive. And let's look at another example where you can really see, not even on a face, how useful it is. Layer, new adjustment layer, vibrance. So again, if I use saturation here, I rapidly get an effect that's just, unless that's really what you wanted, it's not very generally useful. Whereas I can hit the vibrance here, and I can take it all the way to the top, and yeah, maybe that's a little too much, but it's not that bad. You can really punch up the colors in something with vibrance without going over the top and creating something that looks completely unrealistic.
Is the saturation basically the same control as in the U saturation?
As far as I know, it
Basically
is.
doing the same thing?
I believe so. I certainly believe so. If you look at it and do it, it seems like it. If I went in and did saturation on that other one, I think you'd find you're getting exactly the same thing. Okay, the last of the adjustments I want to show you is the photo filter. It's quite possible you'll never use it. I use it a lot. It's kind of a special effect thing. And what it does is very simple. It's as if you had a colored filter that you put over your camera lens when you took the picture. So I'm going to go to that, to photo filter. And the one that happens to be in here is the warming filter. If I drop this down, you can see it's got many zillion others. Plus, I could go in here and simply use the color picker to make it anything I want. But this warming filter, it's like the traditional thing you might use on a camera. And again, you dial in the amount of it you want. You can see it makes the image warmer and warmer and warmer. The one thing you need to note here is it has a little checkbox called Preserve Luminosity. If I actually had color filters over my camera and I kept stacking more and more of them, they'd make the image dimmer as I added them and more heavily colored. But if I click the Preserve Luminosity, it keeps the luminosity values about the same. So it doesn't get really darker. The colors get pronounced, but it doesn't get that much darker. And so if I do something like this, it's nice. I get kind of this late afternoon glow on the thing. And now you're looking at this thing and thinking, well, yeah, that's great, but you've ruined the sky. But of course, if I go to select sky, come on, little guy. And where's inverse? And oops. Sorry about that. Do this. Now I've only applied it to the bottom there.
Where did you get this sky?
I'm teasing you. I'm gonna go back. I jumped way ahead. I just did that to keep you interested, so that you know this is where we're going with it. But that's exactly that's the end point of this. I'm gonna put that all together. But that's exactly it. I just did that to keep you all awake to know that, okay, this is getting really boring and stuff about this stuff. But that's the end result that we want to get to. The last thing I want to show you is an image adjustment. Remember, layer adjustments and image adjustments. Okay? So to get to those, I don't go to layer, new adjustment layer, I go to image adjustments. And then you can see there are a large number of these too. And there's one that I use all the time, and it's called shadow highlights. I don't use it on every image, but I use it on an awful lot of them. Ultimately, it doesn't do anything you couldn't do with curves, but it's easier and faster. And let me just show you exactly what it does. So image adjustments, shadow highlights, and there are 3 different sections: shadows, highlights, and adjustments, which I'm not even going to get into now. And there are 3 sliders within each one. The amount, so this one tells me how much lighter I'm on the shadows. So I'm lightening the shadows. This is how much I'm going to lighten them. This is the range of values over which I will lighten. So if I make this very small, I will only affect the very, very, very darkest parts of the image. And if I make this much bigger, I will affect virtually the whole image. Okay? So if I really just want to hit the absolute darkest parts, I put this over here. And this radius slider, you might have noticed a lot of times when you see an image that's been heavily manipulated, it'll get kind of like these halos around things. This affects that. I don't exactly know technically what the heck it does. My advice is very simple. You move this until it looks the way you want it to look, and then you stop moving it. And it's as simple as that. There's, obviously a scientific explanation for what it does. Don't know, don't care. I just move it until I get it the way I want. And then highlights, it's exactly the opposite. I'm going to take the brightest parts of the image, and I'm going to make them darker. And again, this is the range over which, if I move it down here, I'm just going to make the very brightest, most burnt out parts of the image. So if I move it here, I'm going to affect more and more of the image. And again, this again does the same darn thing. This one, especially with digital imagery, it doesn't have the dynamic range of film, so a lot of times shadows are dark, especially they're dark on faces. And so that's why I find shadow highlights particularly useful. I try to shoot always enough underexposed so that there's nothing that's blown out in my image. There's no white areas that have gone 100%, but as a result, sometimes the shadows are a little too dark, and especially on faces is where you really know.
So I might have missed this, but are you adjusting the image or a layer?
I am adjusting a layer. We're going to get back to that in a second. I'm not doing it here yet because I haven't shown you how to do that, but I will. So that's exactly what we're going to get to. Okay, so we saw what the mask, we saw what a mask is, we saw what an adjustment is. Now we're going to talk about how to make masks, and then we're going to hit exactly what Tom just said. We're going to put it all together. Again, just like with everything else, there are a very large number of masking tools in Photoshop. I basically use 3 more than anything else, and those are the ones I'm going to show you now. And again, this is really where Photoshop has made some changes lately. So let's go to this guy. The first one I want to show you is called object selection. So I go down to here, and I go to object selection tool. And I'm guessing that this came in out of maybe a year or 2 ago, and I'm guessing it uses some sort of artificial intelligence or something. The bottom line is the program simply looks at your image and it automatically decides what it thinks separate objects are. So for instance, when I mouse over that, it says, that looks like a person. Okay? And that looks like another person. And that looks like another person. And that looks like the floor, and that looks like the sky. And all I got to do is click, left mouse click, And now it turns that into a mask, hopefully. Yeah, there we go. I love it when a plan comes together. So now you see what they call the marching ants. So this was really the point of this workshop. Like I say, this is the sort of thing that used to take forever and be a hassle. And now it's one mouse click, okay? It's really good. Now, of course, it's not perfect. And let me just see, actually, it looks like it might have done a better job than it usually does mine. Oh yeah, darn you, Photoshop. Usually it leaves a little bit here, and I was going to show you how to pick that up, and it did a great job.
The train on the wedding dress was left off.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'll see, yeah. It got it there, but on his thing, this is interesting. It never has done such a good job before. So it's a real disappointment, you know, Murphy's Law. But you can see what it
at
did.
his feet was the train of her dress, though.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. I'm going to show you that right now. Okay, so let's say, oh, it didn't get the lens and his hand. So you'll notice up here you have 4 icons. This one is the selection. This is the add. And when I come down here, you notice how there's a plus, whoopsie, there's a plus sign now below the icon. I knew this would come in handy at some point, that way you see the plus sign down there. If I go up to here and click on this one, it's the subtract. Now it's a minus sign. If I go to this one, it's the intersect. I'm not going to talk about that one, it's too complicated. But the plus one is going to add. And so now it's going to keep this mask, and now I can go in and say, you want to add that part? Okay, so now it's added the lens. And then I can go in, it doesn't want to get his hand, and I think if I try it, the other thing I can do is hold the left mouse key down and draw over the thing. I think I've tried this before and it never, okay. Thanks Photoshop for completely screwing me up and now doing a fantastic job. It never worked before when I did it at home. But now you see, okay, it didn't do a perfect job at the beginning, and now with 2 more mouse clicks, it's picked up the lens and his hand that it didn't have. And to do that, I used the plus. The first time it saw the lens, I clicked it, and the next time I just drew a rectangle while I was holding the left mouse key. And now it's added all that stuff. 3 mouse clicks, and I've got a great mask. Okay?
What version of Photoshop are you using?
This is, I'm on cloud, so it's the current one. It's not the beta, it's the current regular one. So whatever, you know, whatever the hell it is. I don't even know if it gives you a version number. 24.7.0. So it's whatever it is now. In other words, it's cloud and I keep it updated.
So if you wanted to remove the train at his feet, you'd use the minus thing?
Yeah, so let's hit him.
And then add it to her.
You gotta watch out because, let's just see. Yeah, you're right, it did a lousy job there. And this is something to point out. No matter what I've done, even if I alter this, when I mouse over it, it always shows the pink area is what it first thought. And even if you change it, it keeps showing you that same pink area, so don't get confused. The pink area is its suggestion, which if you choose to ignore it, it won't change, it'll change the mask. We're going to do that in just a sec. Let me come back to that because I want to show you the one that was asked about before, the second mask tool, which is select means mask. So you'll notice now they have a thing called subject. I actually don't know what the heck that does. And sky. Sky's real useful. Okay. There you go. Because the sky is probably the single most common thing I need to mask. Because it's blown out, or it isn't right, or I don't like it and I get rid of it and I think some nice spots I took in my backyard, 6 months ago, and I throw them in. I do that all the time. Now, it's not perfect. It'll often have the trouble with trees and things where you see little holes in, the leaves you see the sky through. But it took me 1 mouse click to get that. It's better than nothing, and it's not very hard to fix it. And to fix it, I'm going to show you the third one, which is here, the magic wand. Let me go back to the beginning and show you what magic wand does. Magic wand is looking for edges and transitions. So when you click on a pixel, it's going to give you a selection that encompasses all the pixels that are similar. How similar? Whatever you put in this tolerance number, and I don't actually know what the hell that number means, but I know what it does. So if I click up in here, you see it's gotten the whole region. I clicked around here, so it got all the pixels that were similar. And if I put a much larger value here and done the exact same thing, it's going to get much farther because I've given it a bigger value. So this is the way in the good old days I used to get a sky. So now it took me all 3 mouse clicks to get it. Now I get it with just select sky. So hey, you know, it's still an improvement. I'm happy with that. But that's why I used to use the magic wand the most. And the magic wand, again, can also be used for touch-up. Like we were just talking about the train. Let's say I had done that, and I wanted to get rid of it. Let's go back to that train, and I'll do it on that since that's what we asked about. And hopefully, if we're lucky, it'll do exactly the same thing again. So now I'm going to go down here, and yeah, oh, this is actually a lousy example. It's never going to do it because it's white and white, which is why I got confused to begin with. I don't know that it's going to be too happy with it. Well, first of all, it's missing a tiny bit there. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to get this, I'm going to go to plus, and I'm going to put a very small value in it. This probably isn't going to work terribly well. Yeah. You see, it's going to pick this stuff. This is a tricky one. I probably have to align this by hand because it's white on white. So Photoshop is looking for an edge or a difference, and the reason it had trouble to begin with is there isn't one here.
It's all his fault for wearing white shoes.
Yeah, well, yeah, man, come on, dude, it's your wedding, you're like, what's with it? You know?
You go back to the old-fashioned way with the plus and minus.
That's exactly it. I use the magnetic lasso or something like that to get that. Let me show you, though, how to do a little bit of a touch-up, because the one thing it doesn't get here is the church steeple. So it included that, and I don't want that included. So now I go over to here, I do the minus, and maybe let's put in a slightly bigger value. And now when I click in here, I'm just going to keep click, and you can see in very short order, I maybe could have used a slightly larger, see, gotta be careful with this thing. So now in a few mouse clicks, I've basically cleaned it up. So now that the cross, the steeple, which should have been in the sky, isn't anymore. I did that with the minus and the magic wand and a relatively small value. If I'd used too large a value, now if I click on the wrong place, how do I undo that? Well, just go back a step or two. If I used a large value there, it would have gone insane and just gotten rid of everything. There we go. So now I've got a value that's almost certainly too large, and it just went and selected unselected everything. So a lot of times you've got to play around with this thing. And I don't really know what the heck that number is. I just know by experience the kind of range of values I typically have to use to get it to work.
So David, are your notes online?
Hell no. You think I am George Themelis? Jesus.
And you do stereo pairs one at a time?
Well, actually, I pull, all of these were pairs, and I always work in cross-eyed view. So in the original of this, which I may have on here, you'll see. I don't remember what I've got in here. I purposely didn't because I didn't want them to be, yeah, here we go. So this is a cross-eye pair, and you can see on this one I've done a ton of masks. The floor is darker, they're lightened up, the background's bumped up in vibrance, and the sky's darker, because the problem with this image is that, what's it a picture of? It's a picture of these guys, the photographer and the couple, but in a nice background, but it's too busy and too distracting. So this is what I would have probably done with it. I would have darkened a lot of the stuff so that now they pop, and also lightened them up because he's jet black over here.
David, 10 minutes?
Yeah, okay. Thanks for railroading me. Okay, so let's put it all together now, because because that's it. Now we're going to do mask layer adjustment. So let's go back into that original image and see how it all comes together. So the first thing I want to do is lighten up the foreground. So how am I going to select that? Well, actually the easiest way is select sky. But I want the exact opposite. I don't want the sky, I want everything but not the sky. So I'm going to go select inverse, and you see how it flipped it? Okay. The marching ants are now down there in the foreground. And let's do a curve on it. So layer, new adjustment layer, curve. Oh, and this is the thing I've gone by every single time and said I would promise to explain to you. Use previous layer to create clipping mask. If I had numerous layers in this thing and I click this, it means that that curve will only apply to the image directly, layer directly below it. If I don't, it'll apply to everything in the stack. Now, this image only has a single layer, it doesn't matter, and that may be true of everything you guys do. So you probably won't need to worry about that. The one thing I forgot to say when I was talking about the curves before is you can pull this in, pull these endpoints in. So the first thing I'm going to do is, since there are no bright pixels in this image, I'm going to pull this in to expand the tonal range of the thing. And then maybe I'll even slightly bump that up like that. Okay. And now let's say I want to do a vibrance on this thing. I want to do a vibrance on just the building, so how am I going to mask them? I can either go back and do select sky inverse again, or I can go to here, click on this, do select, load selection. I'm just going to take all the defaults here, and now it's just picked up this mask again. So once I've done it, it's convenient. So now let's go layer, new adjustment layer, vibrance. And now I can do the vibrance, and you can see this, actually, you can see, you can rack this thing all the way over and it still doesn't look too unrealistic. And so now you can see I've got two adjustment layers, each has its own separate mask. And now, and the great thing is, you know, a lot of times when I'm doing a series of adjustments, after I've done like the fifth one, I realize, I shouldn't have done the first one that way, I should go back, I should have done it differently. If I double click on any of these things, I'm right back to where I left off. This is that curve that I changed. Same thing here. All of my adjustments are exactly where I left them. So I can go back and say, oh, I got crazy, I shouldn't have picked up the vibrance so much. And I can even make them visible and invisible. This is a little eyeball. So there you go. Now I've just turned them off. So now I can see, oh, you know, should I have even done the curves, or, you know, separately? You can analyze, you know, each one and what its effect is. Now let's say I want to do a shadow highlights on this thing. Remember, that's under Image, Adjustments, Shadow Highlights. So let's just do something like that.
But that can't be done as an adjustment.
That's exactly what I'm going to show you. Yeah, where's my adjustment layer? It ain't there. Guess what? I'm going to undo that. You have to convert it into what's called a smart object. Don't know what the heck that is, but I know when you do it, then you can get at it. So if I right mouse click, convert to smart object, image, adjustment, shadow highlight. Now you're going to see, when I'm through with this bad boy, now I've got it. Oops, I didn't put the layer mask in. Okay, so now I've got that. Okay, undo that. Full load my layer mask. Try that one more time. What the hell am I doing? Load selection. Now I'm going to do that, and you'll see when I do it this time, it's going to leave me my layer mask. So there you go. I've got my layer mask in there. Okay, and I can turn off the mask, you know, or disable it, apply it to the whole thing, enable it. You've got tremendous flexibility with this thing. Okay, so now I want to do the sky. So I'm going to go select sky, And this time, I'm not going to invert it because, again, I want to do the sky. So let's say I'll bump up the vibrance first. So here we go. Maybe I'll even get the saturation a touch. Okay, so do you see? And now you'll see, look, the mask is the exact opposite, you see? It's the sky. And let's say I'm going to do a curve now just on the sky. Get a little bit brighter, like that. Except, oh, hold on, I screwed up. I forgot my mask again. What happened there? I'm going to delete it. I right mouse click, delete. I got two options here. I can either go select sky again. I should have just loaded it from there. And I'm on this layer, and I'm going to go down to this thing, make layer, add layer mask, see the tooltip? And now it's added, the mask there. Or the other thing, which I use a tremendous amount, is I'm going to left mouse click and hold the Alt key, and you're going to see the cursor turns to a double-headed arrow. Now I just copy that mask. I use that one an awful lot, okay? So now you see what's going on here. I've got all these separate adjustments that have now applied to each thing. And then let's try that one more time. Let's say I want to do a shadow highlights on just the sky. Just do something arbitrary. What happened there? I'm not on the right thing. Dang it. Hold on. Let's try it one more time. You always got to be on the layer you're trying to adjust, otherwise it'll ignore you. Okay, but hold on. I was doing the sky. I've got the sky masked. This is what I was saying before. There's only a single layer mask for image adjustments. So you can't do them separately. However, it turns out you can. There's an entirely different set of adjustments over here called, it's a camera raw filter. It's an entirely independent ecosystem of adjustments. It's got a ton of stuff. It's an image adjustment. It supports multiple masks. I didn't know about it until about a week ago. I showed Vanessa. I wanted to, practice my presentation, get her feedback, and at the end she said, "That's great. Why don't you just do it with the lens, with the camera raw filters?" I said, "I never even heard of those." So there you go. But it does support that.
You have a camera to do RAW rather than just JPEG or something.
Well, it'll do it on any image. If I started fiddling with those things, it'll allow me to do it. I haven't played with it. I'm not familiar with it. But of course, the point is that there's always a million ways to do something in Photoshop. I'm not sure that I will ever switch to it, because even though it does allow you to do multiple image adjustments rather than layer adjustments, the way it implements it is not as convenient as the way I do it here, where I see everything laid out. If I wanted to adjust this sky separately, I would duplicate this layer and just have a separate layer with the sky, which would allow me to do an image adjustment just on that layer. But that's it, basically, folks. You can see how really with just a few mouse clicks, I'm able to isolate areas of the image, apply separate adjustments to them, and again, and of course I can turn all this stuff off right here, go right back to my image. So you can see how dramatic the change is made.
And to do the other eye?
And then, yeah, if I'm doing a left-right, that's exactly it. That's when I love, hold on, I closed it. What I do on that, if you're doing a left-right pair, which of course is what I do 99% of the time. Okay, you'll notice on this one, I've got all my adjustments on the left with these masks. What I would do with those then is I will take this and I will duplicate this layer. I'll kill the layer mask. I'll put a new layer mask in on it, and this time I'm just going to use this for a second for, whoopsie, for speed's sake. Now I'll apply that to this. So now I've taken this one adjustment and I've now dragged it over to the other side. So that's what I typically do, is I do one side, I get my adjustments the way I want, then I just simply duplicate all of those adjustments, because now it's picked up that exact same adjustment. This was sky darkened, so it has some sort of an arbitrary curve. And instead of trying to recreate that curve or save it, I've just duplicated it. But by using the masking, I've changed where I have applied it. And that's where that's where the tricky part gets, because if the masks don't match, let me tell you, when you view it in 3D, you will find out in a hurry. But then you go in and using either the magic wand or a lot of times I'll paint the masks. I don't want to get into that today. But getting the mask to match so that they're really close is important. There's a whole way of painting the masks with a paintbrush. So now I've got a mask that I can go in and take the paintbrush and manually alter. I'm not, like I say, not going to get into that now. I don't want to scare you. I wanted to show you stuff that you could do in a few mouse clicks to dramatically improve your images.
David, you can answer a few questions.
Okay.
While you have used the projector, we got to set up for the next
Okay,
one.
cool.
David? So I'm sure you probably use Stereo Photo Maker, and
Yep.
I see that you use Photoshop. Are there other tools that you're using?
For image adjustment, those are really everything I ever use, I would say. You know, my workflow is everything comes into Stereo Photo Maker off the camera. It's auto-aligned and turned into you know, a single left-right pair, which I always make cross-eye because I can cross-eye like a madman, so I can view them in 3D. Then I bring them into Photoshop. Like I say, virtually always do a curve and very frequently shadow highlight. And then the only other things I use are all the things to generate other stuff for my compositing. Like, I might go into a 3D modeling thing and create something that I'm gonna then composite in, or in the things I do with Vanessa, she's sent me a nebula or something else she's drawn that I want to drop in, and then she's done that in Procreate or whatever the heck. But as far as image editing, Stereo Photo Maker and Photoshop are really my whole universe. And again, Photoshop has, in the last year or two, they have made changes that really have cut down the amount of time I spend chasing pixels around.
Have you ever found the sky replacement useful? In other words, you entirely redo the sky?
Hell no, I didn't even know about it.
Oh, all right, that's just one of the new features.
All right, well, there you
Literally
go.
do
Sounds
the
like
entire
some-
thing. You
all right,
pick the
I gotta
sky
look at
one.
that.
I was just
And-
curious if you find it helpful.
Well, I don't even know about it, and
Okay.
my first question is the problem with the sky is that in a left-right pair, you're gonna need to slide it, so you'll
That's
need
exactly what I was
a
wondering.
piece that's missing. So that's why I was saying, I keep skies like crazy, and I'll drop them in, but they're always a little bit wider, so that then I can window them to go to the back. And
You're
in
doing the
fact,
same thing they're doing, but it's...
yeah.
it's better.
Well, but they have to give you, for 3D, they need to, can you get a little bit extra on the edge?
They are bigger, yeah. It's
Okay.
just probably what you're doing makes more sense. I was just curious if you found it useful.
I found like I'm gonna find.
It's just one of the options, sky replacement.
Where
does
is
the
it?
whole thing. It's one of the things right under edit, like it's just
Okay.
one thing in edit, and
Yeah.
you literally just
I
select
have a bunch of
sky
default,
replacement,
a
and
bunch of
it does the
default
entire thing, and
sky.
it actually kind of does more than you want. honestly.
All right, well,
I was just
that's,
curious if you run it.
Something I'm definitely going to be looking into.
If you
Go
get a
ahead.
good sky mask and you like their default
Yeah.
images, it works great.
But I'm always, whenever I see a sky, like I just snap it with my cell phone. I have a folder called Skies, and then I just pull it
You've
in.
got your own mask.
Because I need a sunset for this one. Yeah, I took one of those a week ago in the backyard. Do that all the time, but I'm not averse to using Photoshops for sure.
On a stereo pair, can you remove the border between the two skies and just treat both skies as one?
Yes, you absolutely could. I generally am not in the habit of doing that, but that's just me, because I like to keep all the left-right stuff separate. And also, if there's any difference in your left-right exposures, as soon as you start stretching contrast, you will exaggerate that. So it's not impossible that when I do the curve, I'll realize, the left's a touch lighter. I'm just going to go in there and just tweak that curve the tiniest bit. So that's the thing you find when you start doing any kind of a contrast stretch, and all the curve stuff stretches contrast. You will exaggerate whatever inherent differences you have in your left-right exposures, and none of my twin cameras are utterly perfectly matched. I wish, you know, there's always some slight difference. And a lot of times I'll make it come out. I didn't see it in the original pair, but I start to adjust it. It's like, oh yeah, that sky's a little greener or lighter or whatever. Any more time, or are we done here? Is our work here done? I got 8:55.
You can answer a question until Felix sits down.
All right. Go ahead.
Can you do similar things in GIMP?
I'm not at all familiar with it, but my understanding is there is very little in GIMP that you can't do that you can do in Photoshop, other than, you know, the most recent versions of Photoshop have added some incredibly, excuse me, powerful tools like generative fill and things like that. I don't know if GIMP has or is going to have any of that. And I don't know, do they have the object selection tool? I'm just not at all familiar with it, but every time I've talked to everybody about GIMP, it just seems like they have essentially everything that's in Photoshop. But the object selection tool, again, that's, to me, that's the thing that has brought all this fancy pants masking stuff within the reach of everyone. Because it used to just be so time consuming that it was like, I'm not gonna bother with that. But now, when it's a mouse click away, it's like, yeah, sure, I'll lighten that guy up. Let's do that, you know?
Any issues with using Photoshop with the Mac and switching?
That I don't know. I'm completely PC based, but I mean, well, certainly Photoshop absolutely was, you know, originally designed for the Mac, and I think that it's one of the few things where it's not like Stereo Photo Maker where you got to jump through hoops to run
That's what I
it.
was wondering about the
Yeah.
jumping in Stereo Photo Maker.
Well, Vanessa, are you still here? We lose her. I think she's Mac based, and we trade stuff. Everything we do, we trade back and forth, and I'm pretty sure she's running it on her, you know, on her Photoshop on a Mac.
I use
and-
Crossover, I love it. I mean,
Oh, yeah?
you have to pay for it, it's like $70, but it works just like.
Yeah.
Photoshop.
So I don't know, I'm totally PC based. And, you know, it was for decades, you know, you were a loser if you tried to do anything in graphic arts on a PC. Everything was so designed around the Mac. I would say, certainly in terms of Adobe's tools, those days are finally gone. Thank you.
Now that we have had the rice and flowers, the knot is tied. Why, I can visualize such happy hours close by your side. The honeymoon in store is one that you'll adore. I'm gonna take you for a ride. I'll go home and pack my clothes. You go get your these and those, and away we'll go. On off we're gonna shuffle, shuffle off to Buffalo. To Niagara in a sleeper, there's no honeymoon that's cheaper, and the train goes slow. On off we're gonna shuffle, shuffle off to Buffalo. Someday the stork may pay a visit and leave a little souvenir, just a little cute. What is it? But we'll discuss that later, dear. For our little silver quarter, we can have the Pullman porter turn the lights down low. On off we're gonna shuffle, shuffle off to Buffalo.